Football for me, it means people. Everyone who's involved for the right reasons. They want to play because they love the game, they want to be involved, and it brings connection between everyone, whether it's standing on the sides, whether it's in the crowd, just watching and not playing.
And with football being for everyone, whether you're a coach, a player, an aspiring player for the future, someone seeking a scholarship, a teacher, a youth worker, a professional, a volunteer, someone seeking to get involved in the game, a volunteer parent, whether they're reflecting on their journey and how they can understand their grassroots team, an aspiring academy coach yourself, no matter what and no matter where you're listening, this podcast is really for you. On the Reflective Coach podcast, there are so many wonderful guests that feature on a podcast, whether this is former professionals, current professionals, and professionals of all backgrounds within the Coaching Insight series that really inspire, understand, support, and are reflective amongst this journey as they share their own insights, experiences, their own journey, their own reflections, strategies, insights, and other stories into the Reflective Coach podcast. Each week features a new guest, and each new guest brings something new to the podcast. I've been so lucky to have so many wonderful guests on, and you can really listen to all the episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and Podcast Addict, with continuous updates on Twitter and LinkedIn. By subscribing, commenting, following, engaging with all the posts amongst social media, you can really keep up to date with all the episodes.
So that's not coaching. You know what I mean? Like, we want to put players in situations where the areas that we work on during training allows them to be great problem solvers. And for me, I say it all the time. Like, for me, soccer players are great problem solvers, and great soccer players are great problem solvers. And that's how the game goes, because you might have a game plan going into a game, but if you ain't got a player who can think on their feet and kind of figure out things and have to make changes, then it's not going to be great soccer. So that's something that's really, really important, that the kids have to learn at a younger age, because in that way, as they get older, it's harder to teach them changing their muscle memory and changing the way they think when they get older. It's a lot more difficult. So the earlier we can get it into them, the better. I've got goalkeepers who've got great feet and who've got the ability and the range to be able to play. And that definitely works into what we talk about and how we play soccer, but also the discussions we have as a coaching staff is really, really important. So, and obviously it kind of goes into my philosophy. It goes into, I've always been very, very minded in the fact that every goalkeeper I work with, whether that's at the club level, whether that's a 9-year-old, all the way up to an 18 to 20-year-old, etc., they've got to have developed their footwork and they've got to develop their feet in terms of having a good passing range. So, and I think in the youth game, nothing's worth prioritising. Nothing's worth prioritising. Wins are not worth prioritising over development, especially in the youth game. You're not gonna, you know what I mean? It's not gonna affect you in that way if you're there to focus on development. If that's what you preach, but you don't do it, then it's hypocritical.
And I completely agree.
And that's something that, and that's an argument for the most part that for me ends up against a brick wall most of the time.
Good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Yeah, just messing around with the computer right now, so trying to get. I've got a new computer right now, so I'm trying to figure it out. But yeah, we should be good. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, you're wearing a Chelsea shirt.
Yeah, it's the first time I've actually worn this shirt. I bought it and I've never actually worn it since. So yeah, Chelsea. What about you? Who do you support?
I'm from Old Trafford, so Manchester United. That's where my mum's house is about half a mile from the stadium. That's where I grew up.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, man. Yeah. So United all day.
You can hear the accent kicking in now, to be fair.
Yeah, it's I've been here for about 10 years now, so Americanisms are there, unfortunately. But I'm a Manc through and through for the most part.
That's all right then. So what took you out to America?
So it's a bit of a story, really. I got the opportunity in 2012 to come out and do some soccer camps with a company called Challenger Sports.
Yeah.
Who quite a few people work for. came out there with them in the summer, got exposed to the Midwest, in Kansas City, and fell in love with the Midwest. And then while I was doing my degree in Man Met, I came out every summer. And then 2015, got the opportunity to come out for like 6 months. And then I spent 6 months at home. And then kind of year on year, it got longer and longer. And then 2017, 2018 became more permanent. And then ended up leaving my job back home, and I was coaching for Manchester United at the time. And then came out here full time, and then kind of started building my career in the US. But yeah, so just summer camps, like a lot of people, and it just kind of evolved over time, and got into a place where I got a ton of opportunities out of it. Got to meet a lot of networking, a lot of connections, and doors opened up in a lot of different ways. So yeah, came out with that.
Sounds like a good pathway, good story, good transition, and a bit of a lucky escape to get away from Old Trafford as well, mate, to be fair.
You say that, but I miss Old Trafford, I won't lie. But, you know, the interesting thing is my story is very similar to a lot of the British-based people in football in the US now. But we've all got our own little tweaks and turns, and good experiences and bad experiences, and luckily for me it was very positive, and I ended up meeting my wife because of that experience now, and you know, she's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and she's been an amazing support in this journey that we've taken. That now we've lived in 1, 2, 3. This is our 4th city that we've lived in over the last 5, 6 years. So, and that's just kind of the journey of being a college coach. Kind of takes you from place to another to another. But yeah.
Sounds like you're doing well. Any consideration of coming back, or thoughts?
Nope. It's pretty blunt about that, honestly, because I get asked that question a lot, and I've had a fair amount of opportunities over the years from back home to make my way back there, and honestly, none of them have ever attracted me. There's just nothing there for me in terms of the way my career has been able to build here, and the trajectory I've been able to get it onto here. It just doesn't make sense. That even if the far reaches of the Premier League, etc., like even those opportunities wouldn't attract me to come back home. And I've kind of pretty firmly closed that door, just because I knew this is what I wanted, and this is what made more sense in terms of me being able to do things the way I want to, and being able to take the steps that I want to take versus being held by tradition. This is the way we do things. This is the way we always do things. Sort of cliche. Being here doesn't put me in that box.
And you know, that's good that you can, you know, make those decisions for yourself, and you know, it's a great position to be in. You know, a lot of American coaches which I speak to all say that they'd love to come out to the UK and experience, you know, the English pathway, etc. And then a lot of English coaches want to sort of go in the opposite direction. But where you've had that experience of being in the English game and now American, you know, it's the English game is great because it's fantastic, a great program. But I think the way the American game is going and the programs out there, it's huge.
No, it is, and I think there's also a bigger reality to it too, apart from just the career side, you know, the team that you're working with, etc. There's also a family-based reality to it too, that it's not feasible to live in England on just a coaching salary. It's just not, and that's just the reality, and it's very. Some people shy away from that conversation, and that's actually the truth. That's how it is, and the reality is why so many people end up out here to, you know, try and build a career. And again, if they get lucky enough to be in that pathway due to been in a great situation, and obviously, you know, in my case, meeting my wife and kind of things kind of working out in a really, really natural way. It's more feasible here. That's just the reality, and that's, you know, working in the club system, working in the college system, working in the MLS system, it's feasible to actually live out here and have a life and have a family and all these things, which in England, even from my knowledge as well, in the academy system back home, there are academy coaches who, even if they're full time, they're not doing great. And that's at some of the biggest clubs in the country. They might be full time academy coaches, but then they've got to do extra bits and bobs, or they've got to have secondary incomes or whatever to make things a bit more comfortable. Here, that's not the case as much, just because of the way the business is here. So that's kind of a big comparison that I think people kind of shy away from that conversation, but that's just the reality.
A huge reality, and as you said that, I'm thinking of someone in the back of my mind. So, head of academy goalkeeping in Newport County, then head of academy goalkeeping at Pontypridd United, and then head of all the women's first team manager at Forest Green. And that's the balance of three sort of roles in football. But being one of those, that's a huge commitment. Being head of goalkeeping in the academy, but then trying to take on a women's first team manager and then being at another academy, you're not really seeing a life, because 7 days a week you're going to be flat out from it.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got friends. I've got friends back home who I've got a lot of friends back home who work in the academy systems on the men's side and the women's side, and a lot of those roles in some places, especially on the women's side, a lot of the roles are still voluntary and are still very low paid, etc. And bearing in mind you're working at a really big club, but the money's not available to be getting paid what you should really in reality be getting paid. And the reality is here, you can be a college coach full time and you not need to have a secondary income. And that's across, from Division 1 in the women's game down to Division 3, and then to also alongside NIA, which is a separate system, and then you've got the JUCO system, the junior college system as well. You can make full-time salaries in any of those levels. And obviously that's on the men's and the women's side. And then obviously you can work in the club system, and there's just so many clubs. So you can, again, make money there, because a lot of clubs are for profit. And even in the non-for-profit ones, the money's available. And then you can go into the MLS system, and the MLS system's pretty stringent in terms of, if you work for an MLS club, you can't work outside of an MLS club, so you can't have a secondary income. So there's those avenues are a bit more opportunistic than you would be back home. I mean, I've got a friend right now, for example, who's working at a very very big club back in England, and he's making next to no money. But he's working in a top tier club, a club that, I'm not going to divulge the name, but you would expect him to be getting paid really good money.
Of course.
But he's not. So he has a day job, and then he's also working at that club. So it's difficult, and that's just the reality. But there's also the piece to it where, if you come out here and you want to work out here, etc., going through the correct avenues, making sure that you do things the right way, and making sure that you follow the rules. And that's another piece that I think people get ill advised from. People kind of make a presumption that it's easy, and it's not. This is a great country to live in and a great country to work in, but they have rules that you have to follow to make sure that you do things properly.
And do you have an example of those rules, Ali?
I mean, it's just the simple stuff, right? So, for example, visa rules, green card, immigration rules, etc. Those are simple rules that people have to follow. And then there's going to be other things in terms of ethics as well, and making sure that the system is a little bit weird, where obviously back home you've got the FA, and the FA have a very governing body approach to anyone who coaches football in England, basically. In the US, it's a little bit more complicated, because US soccer is a governing body, but they don't really have too much oversight. There's different governing bodies for different things, so the rules change a little bit from position to position or place to place. So you have to be willing to understand all of those areas before you get into it, so that there are situations where you have to follow a certain set of rules from the NCAA, for example, because you're a college coach, and then you have to follow similar, different, or more detailed rules with US soccer, with the local state association, and kind of filters from there. So it gets a bit more complicated for sure.
A great introduction, and a bit of insight in terms of the English game and the American game, and some concepts around that. But you're doing well. You're an assistant coach / goalkeeper coach, so you've got that sort of opportunity to really look at the technical side and work with the goalkeepers, but then to sort of look at the holistic picture and program whilst being the assistant coach. So that's a nice position to be in.
Yeah, it's been a really good. I've only been here at Arizona State now for August now, so I got here July 1st. Before that, I was at California State Bakersfield, where I was the interim head coach for a little bit, and then I was the assistant coach there for a year. And then previous to that, I was an assistant coach at Illinois State University. And then before that, I was in Kansas City as an assistant coach in a college, and then working in the club game as well. So I've had a lot of good experiences. Very fortunate that I've got to work with a lot of good people. And I've always been in a position for my next step to be a decision of my own creation. And also, it's really important to me that I get to work with people I enjoy working with, and people that I'm going to get along with, but also people that are going to challenge me and make me better. I'm very lucky here. Arizona State. I'm around 3 other colleagues, specifically on the coaching side, who are great people. Graham Winkworth, who's my head coach, he's been here now for 6-7 years. British as well, and a phenomenal person and a really, really, really good coach who's had a lot of success. And then Ross Alexander, who's a Scottish lad, who's been here for a couple of years now and done really, really well as a coach, and someone who's been around in different facets of the game. And then Holly Loud, who's an assistant coach here as well, who came here from a really, really good program in Alabama, and who's also only been here a couple of months. And again, just good people to be around. And again, all of them being British does help in terms of interactions and maybe not having to explain conversations more than I would do with an American coach sometimes. But good people to work with and people that have challenged me, made me a better coach, and people who are good to be around.
I love that, and it's a great position to be in and great experience, as well as those great people which you get to work with every day and get to see and learn from in the process. And not to take away from your role now, because obviously you've only been in it a couple of months, but you've got this wide experience of being an assistant coach in a great position, and you're interim head coach. So on the avenue, typically next people would think the next step would be for a head coach role. And whilst that might be on the horizons at some point and within the thinking. Yep. Is that in your consideration? And if you go into being a head coach and it takes you away from the goalkeepers because you've got, the more responsibility of everything holistically, is that something which you're happy with, is sort of the move away from goalkeeping to look at, the wider program?
So that was part in my decision in leaving Cal State Bakersfield and coming here as well, was the opportunity came up at Cal State Bakersfield, where I was the interim for a while. I was being considered for the head coaching role, and for me, it wasn't my next step right now. And I've been very fortunate over the years that I've been able to make my next step based on where I think I'm at right now as a coach and where I think I need to go. I always want to be best prepared before I step into a role. And for me right now, I want to continue working with goalkeepers and being an assistant for a little bit longer, definitely in the next 4 or 5 years, before I make that kind of step into being a head coach. But I've had head coaching experiences, so in the club game, I've been a head coach in Kansas City. When I was back in Manchester, I was a head coach at a college. So I've had head coaching experiences, and for me, it's not about when it's going to happen. It's not if it's going to happen. It's when it's going to happen. And for me, it's just going to be based on when I think I'm ready for it, really. But Arizona State presented me an opportunity to get to work at a really high level, to get to work with a really high caliber of players, and also get to work around a coaching staff that was going to make me better. And ultimately, that's what I wanted right now in my career. I'm only 30, and I've got 15 years behind me now coaching nearly, and again, I still got a long way to go right now. And I'm very lucky. I have a wife who supports me in those decisions, and she's been great about knowing next steps and kind of where we're going to go.
That's great to have someone on that personal support network as well, and where you're going to go, but also working out at the right time for you, which is good. And whilst you got those experiences and that outlook towards being a head coach, typically goalkeepers are very much included in the defence, so you have a very defensive mindset in terms of how that works in terms of those units and that transition, etc. And whilst being in that mindset and moving into head coach, would you say that naturally you're very orientated defensively to build your team around, or do you try and get out and be more attacking, or is it more of a balanced view that you would have if you were to deploy a framework on a team?
I think it depends on the goalkeeper that you have, or goalkeepers that you have, and also their ability, their range, and what they can do with their feet. Ultimately dictates how you start attacks, and kind of when you start thinking about the attacking side of the game. But I do think that every goalkeeper's got to be defensive minded, because every goalkeeper coach as well, because your job is to defend the goal. That's your first job as a goalkeeper, is to stop the ball going in. But ultimately from there, then the next action is, okay, if I hold the ball, if I've got the ball at my feet, what's my next decision? What can I do to set up my team for success, to get up the field and ultimately score goals? So we're very fortunate here at Cal State, at Cal State, and also here right now at Arizona State, that I've got goalkeepers who've got great feet, and who've got the ability and the range to be able to play. And that definitely works into what we talk about and how we play soccer, but also the discussions we have as a coaching staff is really, really important. So, and obviously it kind of goes into my philosophy. It goes into, I've always been very, very minded in the fact that every goalkeeper I work with, whether that's at the club level, whether that's a 9-year-old, all the way up to an 18 to 20-year-old, etc., they've got to have developed their footwork, and they've got to develop their feet in terms of having a good passing range. So for me, goalkeepers have got to be one of the best passers on the field, and that's only going to happen if they get focused on it and they get to work on it. And that's where you'll see a big gap sometimes between goalkeepers and programs and coaching methodologies as well, in goalkeepers who've got good feet, or goalkeepers who've got great reactions and shot stopping, but they can't hit the 50-yard ball, and can't hit the 60-yard ball, or they can't connect the 10-yard pass consistently. So I think right now, the way the game's going, especially professionally, goalkeepers have to have good feet, and they have to be able to play the game as good as any field player.
And I completely agree with you there, and that was something that I was going to say as well. Thinking of goalkeeper in the back of my mind as you're saying that, we had a very young goalkeeper around under 9s to under 11s, and we wanted to play out from the back, or we wanted him to be able to have the opportunity whether to kick it long or pass out to the left back, right back, centre back, or so on. So he had a range of opportunities in front of him and could make those decisions. But it was one of those where he struggled to kick long, and it was something that he was working on over a period of time. But he also struggled on the short-term passing as well. And we didn't always, so sometimes you had to have the centre back or one of the defenders take a longer kick for him, who could get it up the field for us to build from. Or sometimes when we encouraged it a lot more, and we allowed him the opportunity to do so, which was quite often, it was one of those where if he was playing out to the right back, for example, you start clenching your fists because you're like, oh no, we're already being pressed. They've picked up the ball and they've got a shot off within the 10 seconds of playing out from the back. And it was one of those where we were encouraging and building from, but it was a process of time. And if we don't encourage playing short passes or being able to kick it long, then realistically we're doing that goalkeeper a disservice if the centre back's always going to take it. But it was one of those whereby when we were being pressed, we're like, oh no, and you can see it happening time and time again because he was struggling. So playing out from the back and seeing it in a goalkeeper first hand, I'm absolutely with you in terms of how that has to work for a goalkeeper in the modern day approach.
Yeah, I think though that for me, I have an opinion on when it comes to youth, for the youth game for kids. My personal opinion is, kind of what I was encouraged when I've been involved with clubs, is I don't think there's any positives, regardless of anything from U16 down I don't think any positives come out of a defender taking a goal kick. That's just my flat out opinion on it, and I think that if you let it happen in games, that goalkeeper will never understand pressure.
Yeah.
They'll never understand the need to develop an area because they've got someone else doing it for them. And then also the players in general are not going to learn how to deal with adversity. If, for example, if your goalkeeper had pulled their quad, they can still move around a little bit. It's the only goalkeeper you've got on the pitch right now. You don't have another goalkeeper on the bench, so you're going to have the goalkeeper play on, but they can't kick. So, or they can only play short, whatever it might be, whatever adversity is there. I think it gives the goalkeeper a disservice, and it also gives the goalkeeper it doesn't allow them to build any confidence if they're not taking their goal kicks in game situations under pressure. Because that's how they're going to learn. Like at the end of the day, if you're practicing something in training all the time, but when it gets to the game, you tell little Johnny, hey, Johnny, you're not quite there yet, so I'm not going to let you do it. How's he going to build any confidence?
Yeah.
Or how's he going to build any understanding of what he needs to do? So I think also sometimes it can be a disservice to everybody from the coach because now you're prioritizing winning a game over player development. You're prioritizing it because you're letting the defender take the goal kick, not the goalkeeper take it. And that means you're basically putting that goalkeeper on the back burner. And I think in the youth game, nothing's worth prioritizing. Nothing's worth prioritizing. Wins are not worth prioritizing over development, especially in the youth game. You're not gonna. You know what I mean? It's not going to affect you in that way if you're there to focus on development. If that's what you preach, but you don't do it, then it's hypocritical.
And I completely agree.
And that's something that, and that's an argument for the most part that, for me, ends up against a brick wall most of the time. But there's coaches that have been able to convince her that in the youth game, and in the US game, it can be a little bit crazy because money's involved in the youth game significantly. So people can lose their jobs and people can lose teams and people can, the list goes on. So it gets complicated. But again, I don't think there's any benefit from a centre-back or a defender taking a goal kick for a goalkeeper in a game. That's just my opinion on it.
Absolutely, and I think, there's some teams that I can think of that we've played against, and they might have had 15 goal kicks in a game, and their centre-back has taken every one of those 15. And it's one of those where you're like, right, all this goalkeeper's ever going to do is be limited, rely on someone else, never going to have the opportunity to even communicate with the defensive unit by pulling him up, getting him in, getting him out from the back, having the confidence then to pick a ball up if he's on a one-on-one, and then quickly distributing it from his feet. And it's just one of those whereby you're not really supporting the goalkeeper. And I remember one match that I can recall in my head, and all the opposition coach had him do was clear the lines, kick out his hands, bang it long, and that was the terminology around it as well. But that's all he done was get rid of his line every time. And I remember discussing it with my club chairman at the time. He was like, what is the problem now? It's like, right, they haven't encouraged him to play out from the back. They haven't got the ball on the floor. He's obviously not confident with his feet. He's got no confidence then to, communicate with his teammates. And all he's ever done there is get rid. And imagine him doing that every week in, week out for a year. And the amount of time he's been with that team over the years, that's just going to be a norm for him. So then he's going to be left behind by goalkeepers who can play out from the back or have the opportunity to rotate, because they might end up having a fantastic goalkeeper all round who might come in and might be more selected in that position. And therefore, this goalkeeper might need to play as a right back, a centre back, to get those minutes at those youth levels, in terms of sometimes the way that the game goes over here. But he's not going to be able to because he doesn't have that technical ability with his feet, etc.
Yeah, and again, the other piece to it is that the goalkeeper's game understanding is not going to grow. They're not going to be able to deal with pressure. They're not going to be able to deal with, for example, a moment where there's a poor pass and there's a transition, and then what do we do in those situations? And problem solving. They're not going to be allowed to problem solve because their problems have been solved for them already. So that's not coaching. You know what I mean? Like, we want to put players in situations where the areas that we work on during training allows them to be great problem solvers. And for me, I say it all the time. Like, for me, soccer players are great problem solvers, and great soccer players are great problem solvers. And that's how the game goes, because you might have a game plan going into a game, but if you ain't got a player who can think on their feet and kind of figure out things and have to make changes, then it's not going to be great soccer. So that's something that's really, really important, that the kids have to learn at a younger age, because in that way, as they get older, it's harder to teach them changing their muscle memory and changing the way they think. When they get older, it's a lot more difficult. So the earlier we can get it into them, the better.
And again, I think that's such an important point within itself. And we talk about, opportunities there to develop a goalkeeper and his feet work, etc. But from your experiences and working with a lot of goalkeepers and where you've been with your squads, what is the most common error that you see goalkeepers typically make across the board?
So are you asking specifically with their feet or in general?
It may be with their feet. It may be something else that you've seen whereby you would, appraise it and seen in terms of their technical ability, maybe with their hands catching or dropping the ball, etc. Something that you may see as a common error, whereby if you were to go into, say, 10 different club training sessions next week or whatever program, you could see across the board errors that all these goalkeepers are making.
So, I mean, it can vary, right? There's so much, so many things can vary there. But when it comes to their feet, for example, goalkeepers giving themselves range, and what I mean by that is when they receive the ball and they don't take an appropriate touch that allows them to, like, an appropriate touch is going to mean if I've got the goal behind me, I want to make sure my angle touch takes it away from the goal, but it still allows me to have a range of, I can, with that touch, play a short pass or a long pass and not have to take another touch. If I take a tight touch, I can't play a long pass because I haven't got the swing room to do it. So that's pretty common that you see goalkeepers having to take multiple touches before they play the ball out because they're not thinking about their first touch to give them range. And then the second thing is the goalkeepers having, I will say, right, goalkeepers having different tools in their toolbox. So having a different way of being able to distribute a ball. So in America, the very common thing is you hear the word punt a lot, and all my goalkeepers I've ever worked with will chuckle at this because they've heard me say it a million times. That word drives me nuts because for me it's an American football term that means kick the ball as far as you can. It's what they do in American football.
Right.
And you will hear it across the pitches in all of America. You will hear, whenever the goalkeeper's got the ball in the hand, you'll hear parents, coaches, whatever, shouting, punt the ball, punt the ball. And for me, it drives me insane because I want to teach my goalkeepers to, hey, every time you've got the ball in your hands, there's an opportunity for you to build something, pass something, try and get a moment of attacking going for your team. And that means there has to be a thought process from A to B. Like, what technique are you going to use to get the ball to your left forward? Are you going to hit it as a half volley? Are you going to hit it as a full volley? Are you going to hit a drop kick? Are you going to hit a sidewinder, as we call it? And every coach has got slightly different names for those types of kicks, but they have to have range. And kids don't get taught different techniques early enough, where when they get to 17, 18 years old and they can only kick the ball one way, it drives you insane because at the end of the day, like, you've got no range, and you need to have range to be able to adapt to how deep or high your team's sitting, to how good your first touch, second touch is from your teammates, how well they can control the ball in the air, off the ground, etc. You've got to be able to cater to those things to help your team succeed, and goalkeepers need to have range, and that's something that I still don't see enough of in the youth game here, that coaches giving the time to goalkeepers to work on range and giving them different techniques to work on.
And I love that.
I think that's one of the common things.
I think that's such an important point in terms of both terminology, different ways that goalkeeper coaches might approach it. So it might be different across the board if a goalkeeper was to move into many different programs. What might hold a goalkeeper back there, as well as opportunity to try and develop players where they don't have those opportunities to do so because it's maybe not a consideration or maybe it's not the expectation of the head coach, and it's something that winds goalkeeper coaches up a lot because they're not having the opportunity to develop the goalkeepers where they need to get them, but then the head coach is quite easy to hold that goalkeeper accountable if they make that mistake, but haven't then afforded them the time within the training program. And
that's where there's got to be more common understanding between for example, the head coach and assistant coach, head coach and goalkeeper coach, there's got to be more. There's got to be more communication, and I've been very fortunate over the years that I've been in some great situations. And I go back to when I was in Kansas City. I was the director of goalkeeping for one of the biggest clubs in the city, the KC Athletics. At one point I had 60 to 90 goalkeepers a week coming to training. And for us, it was really, really important that I could communicate to all the head coaches across all the age groups, like, hey, this is what we're working on, this is what we're doing. There was a big transparency because I needed the head coaches to all understand what was going on, so then they could understand where there was accountability and where there would be understanding and where there would be understanding for development on their goalkeepers. And I wanted to make sure there was transparency across the board. So when we built a curriculum there, and I had two phenomenal goalkeeper coaches working for me. I had Kaylin Williams, who's right now an assistant at college, and she was amazing. She's been a pro as well. Last year she played in the Champions League, and phenomenal young coach. And I had Ian Hodge as well, who's another phenomenal coach, who's actually kind of out of coaching a little bit now. But the three of us built a curriculum that was very transparent, and then we gave that curriculum to the parents, we gave that curriculum to the goalkeepers, we gave that curriculum to the coaches, so they knew exactly what we were working on. And sometimes there's this secrecy around goalkeeping and goalkeeper coaching and whatever, that people think that they're doing something, they don't need to talk about it to anyone else or discuss it or whatever. Like there's some secret sauce, and there's no secret sauce. Like at the end of the day, it's understanding, it's goalkeepers responding to the way you coach, how you coach, and what you do. And kind of how you kind of develop different things with them. But for me anyway, the transparency is really important. So, for example, one thing I learned over the years, okay, I want my goalkeepers to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. I'm not gonna just walk up to them and go, hey, this is what we're doing today, get on with it. Like, that approach in coaching is so far away from what people need right now. So what I started doing was I would write out my session plan, and then I would put it in a plastic film, and I would put it next to the post. And then when my goalkeepers set up for training, they would walk over to the goal, they would look at the training session, get an idea, okay, these are the coaching points that Ali's trying to get to us today. This is how we're going to do our activation, so our warm-up, then our activation drill. This is what our technical work is going to be. This is what we also call announce, which just basically means they know where the service is coming from, they know where the balls are coming from. And then we move into the unannounced part of the session, which is the goalkeepers having to make live decisions based on live balls, and they don't really know where the ball's coming from. And then moving into the game-like situation. But the goalkeepers could see the whole session plan, and they would have an understanding of what was going on. And then that way, I'm not just asking them to do this technique. They know why they're doing it, when to do it, and when tactically it's appropriate or technically it's appropriate. And that, for me, yes, I've got college goalkeepers who have got a great understanding of the game. And the four that I have right now, I've got a great technical and tactical understanding of the game. But for young goalkeepers from 13, 14, 15 years old, they need to grow their understanding. How are they going to do that is by looking at session plans. But on the flip side, it also holds me accountable. It holds coaches accountable that you planned your session out, that the kids are going to they get what's going on a little bit. And that actually might help when you start a training session. It might help them that little bit of kind of getting a drill or getting an exercise a little bit quicker than you having to repeat yourself 6 times. Just because they've visually seen it, and they kind of get, okay, I get why the ball's going to go from here to here to here, etc. So that's something I started doing 5, 6 years ago, and I've stuck with it with every age group I work with, whether it's in the youth or in the college game, because I want my goalkeepers to understand what's going on. I think it's really, really important, and I think if more coaches did that, it would definitely be more helpful. And I've always been a person that I want coaches to be held accountable in terms of actually planning out the sessions And I'm far away from the idea of, I don't care how much experience you have, I'm far away from the idea that people are just going to wing it, or people are just going to turn up and do that, whatever. Like, yes, you're going to adapt your sessions, you're going to change into these sessions, but have you got an actual base plan? And again, here in the college game, for example, here at ASU, every session's planned, every single one. It's all, they're all reviewed. We all know what's going on every single day. When I was at Cal State Bakersfield, same thing. Every morning we went through the session plan before we got out on the pitch and set up. Same thing when I was at ISU and then when I was at Mid America in Kansas City. Those things are really, really important for coaches. And I think that there's still sometimes an old school idea that you can get away with it because you know so much, or you've been somewhere, or you've done this much, or whatever. And I think that's very hypocritical of coaches to not be held accountable. When you're holding people accountable, when you're holding players accountable, you don't want to be held accountable yourself. That's hypocritical.
Absolutely, and there's so much within that, and I think the important point that you say is what might be seen as a magic sauce or something whereby the goalkeeper coach might be working with the goalkeepers, and it might be seen to be this mystical session as such because they're away doing their own thing. And one thing that I've definitely seen is teams and clubs over the years sort of go, right, the goalkeeper coach is here, you're the goalkeepers, off you go for the hour over there, and we'll see you back at the end for the game. And that's great sometimes because the goalkeeper coach gets to work with them, but already then you're sort of disbanding them from the squad. You're like, yeah, over there you go, don't see you for the hour, come back in for the game. You're not really then having that connection or interlink with the goalkeepers being part of the technical outfield session in terms of that as well. So it's that right balance of getting that correct as well, which I think is also very important.
Yeah, and I think that, again, that comes from communication between the goalkeeper coach and the assistant and the head coaches as well, that there's got to be more conversation. And even, in any examples that any environments I've been a part of now where, we're going to have times where we need to do technical work, or we need 45 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever it might be with the goalkeepers. And then, let's integrate into this part of the session. Or, for example, if we're going to do a session on dealing with a high press, for example. Okay, so how can I tailor the last part of my goalkeeping session before we go in with the team to tailor into what they're going to see with the team? So I could set up an exercise that allows us to deal with quick transition moments outside of the box, which we would deal with a high press, and then turn into a shot stopping moment for the goalkeepers. So I want to make sure I communicate so I can recreate those moments, and then there's a seamless transition from being in a goalkeeper session, for example, and going in with the team. And I think that a lot of coaches do that pretty well. And then again, back to what we said before about the secret sauce thing, whatever, like it might be, like every coach is the worst. Every coach is a great thief, is what we always say, right? Is because every coach is doing is taking ideas from someone else put out there, whatever, and manipulating it into whatever works for what you're doing. Now, the important part of that is making sure that you're not directly taking something and just directly applying it, because you're not thinking about age factors, level factors, ability factors, etc. So you have to consider all those pieces before you do anything like that. But I've got an array of goalkeeper coaches that I'm a huge fan of. I love having conversations. I'm very fortunate that I'm able to reach out to a lot of pro coaches and a lot of national team coaches and coaches working at a really high level, that I'm able to pick their brains and I'm able to have conversations and I'm able to discuss things. And I'm very lucky. I've got a couple of goalkeeper coaches in the NWSL now, the Women's Pro League here, that I've become friends with, and then I can send them a message on Instagram or text them or whatever and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or what are your thoughts on this? Or how did you do this, etc. And I think that's got to be more the direction people take than trying to keep things secret. And I think the other thing is the same reason why I do a lot of videos in my training sessions and I post them online, so YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, mainly because I want to just have conversations with, hey, this is kind of what I was trying to work on. this is what I did with my goalkeepers. If this was pretty successful, this kind of wasn't. And then, our people DM me or people message me like, hey, like I like that, but did you think about this? Or maybe you could tweak the session like this, or actually that was great, can I take that and use it? Etc. Just a conversation is super, super important. And I think that's something that I wish coaches did more of than they do right now.
And again, another important point which you make there as well in how to support the goalkeepers within that process, and it's an ongoing process for goalkeepers to be involved and have that communication and interlink with the outfielders a lot more, and how they can personally develop in that process. And whilst it comes down to it, then, and say you got a head coach or you're working with any coach, and they want the goalkeepers to do the dynamic warm up with the outfield players, and then they can go off and do the things with the goalkeepers. Yeah. And then come back in. Is that something that you'd be encouraging and want from your goalkeepers, or would you want to do the warm up with them separately into their session and then back in, or how would you sort of look around that in your perspective?
I think it depends. I like it. I like it when the goalkeepers jump in with the team, and sometimes the head coach will request it too, just because we want to keep everybody together. And sometimes the goalkeepers want to bring in some of the outfield players to jump into our warm-ups and have some fun and do something different. So, we'll play spike ball sometimes as like a warm-up. I don't know if you've ever heard of spike ball, but it's a fun game. Or soccer tennis, or two-touch, or whatever it might be. So there's ways to alternate it that I think is really, really useful. But also there's some funny conversations that the goalkeepers will have with me with, like, for example, like if we're playing soccer tennis, for example, and the outfield players are like a couple of yards away warming up, and they're all staring over going, well, how come we have to run and the goalkeepers are playing soccer tennis, like whatever it might be. So that little bit of banter and stuff like that is always fun. It's always good to have, and I think it's really, really good. But also this preference too, like my goalkeepers like to warm up on their own, and they like that minute or two of solace, where they kind of get to just do their own thing, kind of zone into what they're doing. They've already looked at the session plan. They have an idea of what's going on now. They've got their time with the team in terms of the walk over to the practice pitch where they've chatted and, chatted in the locker room, chatted in whatever. And then they want to kind of just zone in for a second and kind of focus on what they're going to get on with today. So it just depends on the environment you set up as well. We run a very professional environment here at ASU, very similar to a pro club environment, and we're very lucky. We have some great resources to be able to do that, and that environment encourages things. But also, I've been at schools and programs where the resources might not be there, but the coaches are zoned into keeping a professional environment, and I'm very lucky that some of the staffs I've been a part of. I go back to Cal State Bakersfield. Sebastian Bescio was my head coach there, who was also a goalkeeper coach before he became a head coach. So we had a really, really good relationship, and he was all about things being professional, things being done properly, and I was in that same mindset, and so we had a really good relationship with the way things were done, and we would go above and beyond where we needed to make sure that those things got done, even though we might have not had the resources that we needed. We were definitely, pushing things. So that was, I go back to a really funny night in my head. We were getting a brand new locker room for the women's team at Cal State Bakersfield. And one night we wanted to do a little surprise before we revealed the locker room to the girls. We got a picture printed out of an action shot of them, and then we wanted to stick that picture or vinyl it into the back of the locker. So when they opened the locker, it would light up, and it was light up on their picture. And it was kind of like a little personal touch to each of their own lockers. And me and Sebastian looked at each other and we were like, okay, we can either pay someone $250 to come in and apply all 30 of these one by one, or me and him can YouTube it and just do it ourselves. And we were like there for like a couple of hours on a Friday night, late at night, just doing it one by one. And like little things like that, like we would go above and beyond for, because that's the environment we wanted for our players. And so I think that's really, really important that you have to you have to be able to be willing to put in that time and work to give the environment that you're trying to create. And sometimes you have to get on with it yourself.
I think that's brilliant in terms of what you've done for the team, and being there and putting in those hours and doing something, and something which means something as well, which is so great. And I'm completely with you there, because integrating goalkeepers and having them in those expectations and standards which you apply in terms of that professionalism, and having it being seen in contrast to another program that might be professional, or whatever your expectations may be, they're still ingrained and they're there for a reason. And when I started to have that, we had goalkeepers coming in, and we had a dynamic warm-up, which we'd always do. But the goalkeepers started to drift away from doing it, because they're like, we're goalkeepers, we don't have to do the dynamic warm-up. I was like, yes, you do. It's a warm-up regardless. A goalkeeper does it, a striker, a defender. It's nothing different. It's not an outfield-only exclusive warm-up. And it also integrates you with the team's communication. And then I'm happy for you to go off and do your session with the goalkeeper coach. But it was one of those where it was just that attitude and the approach around it. They were sort of like, one of them wanted to always get out of it, because he was like, I'm a goalkeeper, shouldn't have to do this, and then he sort of dragged the other goalkeeper with him, and in doing that I was like, no, the expectation is for you to do the dynamic warm-up and to be part of it as you come into the session.
I do think that's a really good point in terms of the mentality of in some respects, the mentality of a British player over an American or international player as well. The idea of dynamic warm-ups, stretches, strength and conditioning work, etc., is very highly valued here. And so it's pretty ingrained pretty early on. So I'll give you an example. I was out at a club observing a session about a week ago. And I was getting to watch a really, really good coach that I know, and she's a really, really good goalkeeper coach. And she had set up an environment for her goalkeepers that she would set up a warm-up, and then she would, wander up and go and watch one of the teams train while the kids are getting warmed up. And it was really, really good to see that when I was looking across the pitch, her 8-year-old, 9-year-old, and 10-year-old goalkeepers had just turned up, and they had just started warming up on their own without being told anything. And that's the environment and the culture that she's created for her goalkeepers, that it was a norm to, like, okay, if coach isn't there or coach is doing something, the cones are set up for your warm-up, get going. And they were already doing it without being told. And I think that's a really, really big cultural difference in the States, is that there's a lot of emphasis on that area and on injury prevention, on building strength and conditioning stuff, and doing outside work as well, on top of what else you do at club. And also just general dynamic warm-ups and stretching as well. My goalkeepers will do a dynamic warm-up, and they'll stretch for a good amount of time to make sure they're feeling good. And if I ask them, hey, are you feeling good? And they'll be like, yep. Or like, I need a couple more minutes. They'll get a couple more minutes to do what they need to do. And that actually kind of leads on to, for example, the day before a game, and also on game day warm-ups, I tell my goalkeepers all the time, like, hey, do you need another rep? Like, don't be afraid of asking for another rep or another element that you might need from the training session. Just because I said, hey, we're going to do 5 or we're going to do 6, and you said, you're like, you know what, I need 7, I need 8. That's fine. Like you're owning your own development, and you're owning your own mentality of knowing when you're ready and what you need. And that's so important for these kids to get that, to understand that, like, hey, like I know what I need.
And I think that's such an important point in asking and coming forward to also take that ownership and accountability over their learning process and what they want from it, and not being afraid to say, yeah, let's do it one more time, especially for a goalkeeper, because for a goalkeeper over, say, a 90-minute game, there's so much focus that is required from them. Just by getting and just, can we do it one more time? Yes, of course we can, because that is a long period of time to try and stay focused for, especially if you're not touching the ball for long periods or moments of the game. There might be 5 or 6 minute blocks where you're not touching it, and then then it might add up again, or you might just have the odd one or two saves, and you're not getting as much time on the ball as an outfield player, obviously, but for that focus in between those transitions and when you're at the back and maybe just stood there on your own, there's a lot to sort of integrate in terms of that mentality, and to sort of be very aware of maybe why a goalkeeper hasn't reacted, but ensuring that they're in that position where they're ready to do so as well. So it's fantastic work with the goalkeepers. I think that is just another sort of complete different mental frame to work with goalkeepers in itself, because of how much goes into working with them.
Yeah, but it's also creating that environment as a coach that you have to give your goalkeepers the confidence that they can ask for those things. That's really important. And then kind of tying into that, I always want my goalkeepers to not think that just because I say, for example, if I say stop, stand still, or if I say goalkeeper, like, hey, do you think that went well? Or do you think that was the right decision, for example? I want to create an environment where my goalkeepers are confident enough to tell me, like, yeah, I did. I absolutely made the right decision. Not to think that I'm going to tell them they did something wrong, or not for them to think that I'm going to tell them that wasn't good enough, blah, 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 blah. I want them to have the confidence to say, yeah, absolutely, that was definitely the right save I had to make, or that was definitely the right decision. I'm happy with that coach. Like, instead of instantly thinking that they've done something wrong when coach says stop, stand still. And I think that is a very old school mentality that is littered throughout coaching, that most kids think that, like, hey, when coach goes stop, freeze, whatever, everybody goes shit. Excuse my French. Everybody goes crap. Like, oh no, like I'm in trouble, I've done something wrong or whatever. Like, I want the kids to have the confidence to say, no, everything I did there was perfect. That was great. Like, I made the right decision now. And I've got a freshman goalkeeper right now who's obviously in her first year in college soccer, and that's something she's had to learn. And she's getting there where she's getting confident in decision making, and she's happy with what she's doing. And that's super, super important, because that's going to help her build her up, to get her to being a starting goalkeeper at the college level.
And I think that is really important as well. Again, comes down to that terminology, attitude, and sort of that environment which you are creating, and being that two-way position with the communication that you're giving as the coach. Because again, yeah, it is one of those things whereby you could say that, and then already it's expected to be one thing compared to what it should be, because we've moved on past that. But the mentality has been to, that they're in trouble, etc., because that's the way it's always been perceived or come across. And I'm completely with you. And as much as we talk about the game, moving on, there's still a lot of that which still creeps into it, especially from, being over here in the UK, for example, that we still see. We're still very much stuck in our ways, but you might see it overseas as well. But I think that trying to turn that on its head and have that different expectation, and, thereby giving more confidence to your players and what they want and how they respond to that, I think is fantastic in terms of what you're doing, Ali.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And that's the thing. I think that's important that all the coaches think about that. And there's a great, whenever I think about that, there's a great book that comes into my head by Tony DiCicco, who's a legendary US women's national team coach. And I used to say all the time, like, catch them being good. And he wrote a book on it as well, which is a brilliant book. If you ever had a chance to read it, I would definitely encourage it. You'll find it on Amazon or whatever. And it's a brilliant book on opportunities to have positive coaching moments. And I think that's something that a ton of people could learn from. And I think that, it's a great opportunity to really reflect and kind of think about, like, how you deal with moments where you can have a coaching point, or moments where you can encourage the goalkeeper's confidence. And even for me in training sessions, I record all of my training sessions on an iPad, and there's opportunities there for me to, when I watch back on training, okay, maybe I should have worded that differently, or maybe I could have done that a little bit differently, or maybe that was pretty good, that worked out the way I wanted it to, or the way the goalkeepers wanted it to. And then they'll reflect on video as well, because all my goalkeepers watch back on training, and that's really, really another really important tool for reflection.
And I think that's good as well, to have that visual reflection for them. And you've already taken away one of the questions in my quick fire questions about what is one book you'll recommend, and one that I quickly jotted down there as you said it. But it's also how everything else that you say within there, which is really important points. And for the last 56 minutes that we've been chatting, it's been such a wonderful goalkeeper sort of session, whereby I've you're making me think so much, but also the key considerations. And as you said, directing people to your YouTube and Insta, etc. It's there to try and create that discussion. I love that, because this is entirely what I want from each and every episode on here, especially around goalkeepers, because I've never had a goalkeeper masterclass. So it's already doing that in terms of what we've done, and it has been such a wonderful conversation so far. And it's like speaking to a complete guru in terms of the background from all goalkeeping so far. And that's just not even touching the surface, but it's just been such a fascinating insight for the last 56, 57 minutes.
No, I appreciate it, and I'm far from a guru for sure, but I'm very lucky that I surround myself with people that I'm able to kind of pick their brains, and people pick my brains, and that the reason I love coaching, and the reason I love being involved in football for as long as I have now, is because I get to be around people who want to have those conversations, and that's really important. And also, people willing to have those conversations without being offended or without taking it as a personal attack. If you gave an example or if you gave a suggestion, I can fire off a bunch of names of people who have been great for those conversations specifically. And again, I go to Lisa Cole, who's a phenomenal goalkeeper coach and goalkeeper coach educator, and for United Soccer Coaches. She was just a technical advisor for the Zambia women's national team in the World Cup. And Lisa's a phenomenal educator and someone who I've been very lucky to have some great conversations with. And then Sergio Gonzalez, who's a goalkeeping coach right now for the Racing Louisville, which is the NWSL team. Sergio's also a coach educator as well, and he's a great person to reach out to and text and talk, and goes on to a lot of other coaches that have been able to kind of pick their brains a little bit. And it's nice to be able to have those conversations with people working at that level of the game and working at the youth level, at the college level, whatever. It's always really, really good to be able to have those conversations with the coaches.
Absolutely, and that's where it's at, and not trying to disadvantage people or people, responding in a negative or defensive manner, but trying to have these discussions whereby that's where the actual learning for me happens. Because there's somewhere I've spoken to people and they've become defensive. I'm like, that's not the aim of it. The aim is just to try and cause you to think about it and generate a discussion in another direction, whereby then we've elaborated two different mindsets, and then where we've got all this different input and output, and that's where the real learning takes place, rather than this is that one or two conversation and this is the outcome. But I completely agree with you there. And whilst we've been back and forth building up to this episode, and we were chatting yesterday, I'm not sure whether you've got anything you'd like to share, Ali.
Yeah, so I can show you a session. I'm about to share my screen. Give me a second. I've got settings and
no problem.
What I can say is, so I post a lot of stuff on social media, on a YouTube account as well, and I put a pretty detailed description under each video on social media, on YouTube as well, that kind of goes through my thought process behind every session that I do. And then at the bottom of that, I always put in some questions of some of the things that I went through my mind when I was building the session. So the reason I do that is to entice some conversation, to get some people to respond about what they think, if this works, if this doesn't work, or why they would do it differently. And those pieces are really, really important for me for my growth and my learning as a coach, but also my kind of journey right now. I'm undertaking a journey right now of becoming a coach educator, with some goalkeeping licenses and stuff like that right now, and that's an area that I want to explore more of, and that's something that I think that having those explanations behind all those videos is really, really important, because that way coach can kind of see the context behind what's going on and not just see what we call social media, or so that YouTube goalkeeping is just a video of a goalkeeper doing a bunch of drills and there's no context. And I think having the context is really, really important to understand why they did what they did and why the session built out the way that it's built out. And I think that's something that I try my best to portray when I post about that on social media. But like, if you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, it's the same handle as Coach Ali H. And on YouTube as well, as under the same handle. You'll see videos with all the explanations that kind of go through what I think about the way I do certain sessions and what I'm looking at, whether when I start breaking down goalkeeping. So the 3 ways you kind of want to break down the session focus is, am I defending the goal, am I defending the area, or am I defending the space? And those 3 areas are the way I always start a goalkeeping session. Now, okay, if I want to focus on defending the goal, then what's the next subtopic of that piece? Or if I'm looking at defending the area, what's the subtopic of that? And if I'm looking at defending the space, what's the subtopic of that? And I kind of build up my session from there. So that's really, really important. That I think goalkeeper coaches that need to make sure that they have these detailed ideas of why you're building a session, not just get in goal, make a bunch of saves. How is it realistic? And then, for example, I'm not the biggest fan on sessions where the goalkeeper's making 4 or 5 saves in a row, because it's unrealistic. Typically, a goalkeeper works for about 7 seconds at a time in a game. So in those 7 seconds, they'll make a save. They may have to have 2 actions. They very, very unlikely will have 3 actions. So me doing an exercise where they're making 4 or 5 saves in a row is unrealistic to what they're going to see in the game. Now, that's not saying there isn't a time and space for that, because there is a time and space to have multiple reps, because it will be very technical focus if it is multiple reps, not tactical. But there's got to be a time and a place. For me, if I'm doing something with multiple reps, I'll do it at the start of my session. I won't typically do that towards the end of my session when I'm trying to create a game-like environment for goalkeepers, because that's not what they're going to see in the game. They're not going to make 5 saves in a row in a game, and if they do, it's super rare. So, for example, one of my goalkeepers in a training match a couple of weeks ago, she made like a triple save, right? Save. But I asked her about it. I said, hey, like, when would you do that in a game? And she goes, it's pretty rare. Like, that I would need to have 3 moments like that. So we don't really do triple saves in training that much, because we don't need to, because it's not realistic. But from a technical standpoint, we might need to do rep after rep after rep to make sure we're focusing technically. Even after fatigue, we're still focusing on our technique and getting our technique correct. That's why we're doing it multiple reps, because it's building a bit of fatigue and still having concentration and focus on your technique. And that's really important to, again, have context to why you're doing it. So I'll always explain to my goalkeepers, or they'll ask me and I'll explain to them that this is why we're doing this. This is the reason why we're focused on it. This is the reason why I built the session out the way I built it out. Because I'm not all seeing and all knowing. So they'll give me perspective and thoughts and things that they see in the game that I might have to tweak and change. And I have to be open to doing that. I can't be offended by that. I have to be open to listening to that. And that's really, really important. I think sometimes coaches kind of get away from the idea that the goalkeepers have a say, and the goalkeepers have a right to talk and say, like, hey coach, I don't really think that makes sense, because that's not what I would see in the game. So then, I have to be willing to go, you know what, that kind of makes sense. Let me tweak that or change that. That's something I've done quite a few times, because I'm open to that conversation. I think it has to happen at some point.
Again, reiterating such a good point around that communication and supporting the goalkeepers. But then you also talk about realism within the game, and sometimes, I've seen coaches do multiple saves one after another and after another. And again, they are getting repetition in with that, but then is it game realistic? Because how often then are the goalkeepers doing that? So if they're doing repetition after repetition, and then in the game they might just have one save and then they have to distribute the ball really quickly, how quickly are they distributing the ball? And then if they're not, then that's maybe something that they haven't worked on because they've only worked on, shot stopping, for example. So when you have repetition, technique, get that focus into it, you give context and realism. How do you improve reaction time for a goalkeeper then if you were to develop that type of technique within them?
I think reaction time is going to be built in due to different triggers, and I've tried really hard over the last couple of years to get away from the idea of saying go, or saying anything really that gets the goalkeeper to start moving. I think that that's unrealistic as a coach, because that's not the trigger that they're looking for to react to. Do you know what I mean? Like, they haven't got someone on the pitch going, "Hey, go, let's make a save right now." Like, that's not what's going on in the pitch. So I try my best for my goalkeepers, for example. Either it's a touch, that's their trigger to initiate their movement, or it's themselves mentally where they're at to start their movement whenever they're ready, and build reaction time into that. I think that's more realistic because that's what they will see in the game, versus they wouldn't have someone telling them, "Okay, now it's time to make a save." Like, I need them to read the game, I need them to read triggers, and I need them to read body language, and I need them to read movements and first touch and bad touches, good touches, etc., to read those triggers to initiate their movement. And also them being educated as goalkeepers, educated as footballers, that they have game understanding of what else is going to trigger their movement and their moments. And I think that's what I try my best to build into sessions, because, and I'm guilty of it still, for sure, that I've still sometimes catch myself saying go, or clapping my hands, or giving a thumbs up or whatever, and it's something I'm working on, trying to get away from as much as I can. And so that goalkeepers have a more honest, a more honest approach for the game. They're not cheating.
And I think I'm completely with you there in trying to reflect upon things that I may do that I want to try and move from, whereby then they might see that as detrimental, or it may be detrimental in a way because of the way that I'm portraying it. But I think what you say there is an important point, is trigger points as well, because you might have a typical coach convert into a goalkeeper coach because fun, sparse, etc. But when you talk triggers, what sort of triggers would you focus on with the work with your goalkeepers and the work that you do?
So, for example, one would be if I'm going into a 1v1, or what we call breakaways here, a 1v1 session. I'm actually going to post a session that we did last week, sometime today or tomorrow. And it was the goalkeepers reading the first touch, or the goalkeepers receiving. The goalkeepers reading the players receiving the ball. So what the trigger there is going to be either the body movement in receiving the ball, or the initial touch when they receive the ball. Are they taking a heavy touch to get a shot off quickly, or to create space, or are they taking tight touches to try and dribble towards the goal and get tighter to the goal? What's my goalkeeper reading to either stay and make the save, or approach and go and smother the ball, or approach, set, block the ball, etc.? Like, what are they reading to make those decisions? And then obviously in the session, am I creating a variation of those moments so they're not doing the same thing over and over again, and they're actually staying honest in terms of they're not starting to cheat? By they already think they know what's going to happen, so they start cheating, and then their movement's not realistic for the game. So we have a lot of banter around that too, because I'll catch my goalkeepers cheating a little bit, and I'll call them out, and then they know, and then they'll be like, "Okay, shit, like I need to be a bit more honest here," and that's a good relationship. The other two, it's a little bit of fun as well, and also when they get caught cheating, you score on them, and then they're like, "Well, crap, like, yeah, I should have done that." And then Ali's not megging me or putting the ball in the bottom top corner, like, because I got caught. So, and that's something that's really, really important as well for them to stay honest about those moments. Definitely there's opportunities with goalkeepers to cheat a little bit, but that comes from game understanding, from experience as well, that they can create those moments. But in training, I want them to be as honest as possible.
And I think that's important as well for goalkeepers and any player to be as honest as possible in that approach as well. But again, it's that great work that you continue to do and deliver. And whilst I've spoken to a lot of coaches from America on the pod, they all talk about their squads and we talk about rotation and selection, etc. And they all say that they might have 3 to 5 goalkeepers within their squad, and that is a lot of goalkeepers to have within a team, and especially say over a 30-game season. That's a lot of rotation or a lot of deselection where goalkeepers, might not be picked. And some coaches that I've spoken to are very particular on picking their team. And if you're selected and you're not being selected, that's the way it is. And every head coach selects their team and has rotation and whatever within their program very differently. But when you've got, say, 3 to 5 goalkeepers within that goalkeeping union, it can be difficult to have that rotation, that momentum, that consistency, that motivation to try and get selected if they're not getting selected. But even having 3 goalkeepers and rotating is difficult, but 3 to 5 is very, very difficult. So when it has been like that in squads that you've worked with, and you might have quite a few goalkeepers, how do you manage the goalkeepers over a course of a season then?
I think that for me, it's also trying to make sure that the goalkeepers understand their role, and also keeping them motivated is really, really important. I think that it's the challenge of every goalkeeper coach, and of every coach in general. When you've got a big roster, a big team, and in the college game, it's pretty average, typical is to have 3 to 4 goalkeepers. And a lot of that is to do with having depth, but also when you're playing 20 games in a 3-month period, and potentially 24 or more if you go to nationals, you've got to have depth. That's just the reality. You have to. And then also when you've got goalkeepers over a 4-year period, typically, you've got to have depth there too. So it's just keeping them motivated and having honest conversations is really important, because then the goalkeepers know where they're at and they know what they need to do better, what they need to do to pip out a number 1, etc. Like that's something that's really, really important. And I think that it's hard in the college game. That's just the reality. And I've been there myself as a player. And again, when you've got a goalkeeper ahead of you or 2 goalkeepers ahead of you, like it's hard to position to be in. But you've got to find a way to have motivation, but also honesty from the coaching staff, because then you're going to be a bit more willing to do stuff than to not.
And I think you raised an important point there, and it can be difficult when you've got 2 goalkeepers ahead of you to try and be motivated to get back within that squad. But when it's solely down to that communication, that rotation, that depth that comes into it, then that's where the understanding and the work can truly come in from a psychological point of view with a goalkeeping coach and a relationship that can be established within that goalkeeping union. It's just hard to obviously be part of that and to see 2 goalkeepers ahead of you and how that game time may look. And then to try and gain momentum when you haven't, say, played for 4 or 5 games and then you're expected to play 2 or 3 on that rotation. It can be sort of difficult as that rotation looks. But over that 4-year period, you might have 4 goalkeepers and, naturally you might see 2 stand out in the first year. And typically then, would you see, one of those top 2 being in the top 2 at the end of the 4-year program and definitely being within there? Or would you always say it's very, very varied and 3 and 4 might finish 1 and 2 and then 1 and 2 and this combination might change consistently over 10 years? Or would you always say that there's one goalkeeper that you notice and they'll always be where you pitch them to be at the end of that program?
No, I think it's subjective, just because there's so many factors in play. In a college game, education is a big factor. So how well the kids doing in school, if they're pursuing the school that they want to do, or if they want to change it, that factors into it. Injuries obviously factor into it. Naturally, if you're bringing in a goalkeeper because you want them to be the number 1. So how their development goes is a bit on you and a bit on them. And obviously kind of the conversation that you have about where they're at, and obviously here as well, the other opportunity that we get is in the springtime. So in the fall right now, from August to November, December, is our competitive season. And then in the springtime, from usually February till April, you play 5 games. So you only get 5 dates to play games on. And that's where you get an opportunity to have your current number 2, number 3, whatever, kind of get some minutes and playing competitive games. So those opportunities come around a little bit, and then obviously you've also got pre-season games as well where you can chop change things around a little bit. But that just depends on your coaching style and also what your coaching staff agree on and what they think is best for the program and what's best for those goalkeepers individually. So there's just so many factors that play to it. It's really hard to answer that question specifically. It just depends on your situation.
And I've been there as well. I'm just thinking as you're chatting now, when I was at Newport County, I was very lucky whereby I had 4 very good goalkeepers. And it was great to have that selection of 4 goalkeepers. It's great to have 2 great goalkeepers, but 4 is, the world is your oyster. And it's a great position to be in, but it's also the very worst position to be in because it was very hard to justify dropping 1 or 2 goalkeepers for the next 2 to come in. And it was just consistently hard to try and balance all 4 of them over a course of a season because they're all 4 excellent goalkeepers who would have been first team or first choice goalkeepers in 4 different squads, for example. It was just fortunate and unfortunate that they were all blended in one squad together. And, it was great because they pushed each other and they were great as a goalkeepers union. But then it was really difficult around that team selection and having to drop one to get one in and one missing out. It was just such a headache, and one that I'm sort of glad to be past. But they were 4 wonderful goalkeepers, and when it comes down to the goalkeeper coach and the work that they do, I think it just shows the quality when it actually you're able to see a goalkeeper come into a game, then play really well, then the second goalkeeper comes in, plays really well, third and fourth, and then you're at a real fantastic point. So I think you can really see the work that you do as a head coach and a manager, etc. But I think you can also really see the work when you see a goalkeeper coach and what the goalkeepers can produce over the course of a season as well.
Yeah, and also ultimately where there's areas of what we do that don't really get seen, but also you're judged on very black and white things as well. So, keeping clean sheets, goalkeeper coaches are judged on that. How you concede goals or if you concede set pieces, etc. Those ones are all factors that you can be judged on. And then moments of mistakes and kind of how mistakes develop, if they are one-offs or consistent. Those things you can all be judged off, and at the end of the day, it's a battle every day in terms of trying to figure problem solve all the time. But ultimately, you've got to make sure you create an environment where the goalkeepers are willing to put the work in, but also be honest with each other, and everybody be honest with kind of what's going on, how people are doing and how things are going, and then you can kind of move on from that.
And so you might have a few goalkeepers. They might want to transition from outfield to goalkeeper, or they're starting out to become goalkeepers within their squad, or they're starting out on their football journey and they like the idea of playing a goalkeeper. And they really want to be supported in their development and maybe a pathway towards being a goalkeeper. And whilst they're starting out, they're very raw. They're there to learn, and their mind is very, very open at this point. What would be one thing that you would say to definitely work on, and then one thing to maybe steer away from that might be a bad habit that you've seen in goalkeepers as a goalkeeper coach?
I think one thing to work on would be to never put yourself in a box. And I mean that, no pun intended, but I think it's really difficult sometimes to have a kid start being just a goalkeeper when they're 10, 11, 12 years old, because they miss out on so much in terms of their footwork ability, first touch, etc. I think that they should stick with doing as much outfield work as they can for as long as they can. I think it's super important. Steering away from, I think, not getting overly focused on one area. I think you have to be as well-rounded as you can as a goalkeeper. You don't want to just be known as a shot stopper, for example. That doesn't help you. Every goalkeeper is ultimately the fundamental piece of being a goalkeeper is being a shot stopper. Okay, so how well do you manage your team? How well tactically do you understand the game? How well can you communicate? How well can you distribute the ball? How well can you deal with crosses? How well are you good with one-on-ones? How well do you do under pressure from a striker, etc. So there's so many other elements that you can kind of be a bit more well-rounded on. So that's something that I think is really important, to not put yourself in a box of only doing one type of goalkeeper. That's really, really important. I think that'll probably be my best advice is to any young goalkeepers right now. Just to kind of also have fun. Like, our job is to ruin a striker's day as much as possible. But also our job is to bask in the idea of doing things that people don't really notice. And also, there's so many times where my goalkeepers will, for example, make a fingertip save that no one sees the goalkeeper touch the ball, and I'm going nuts about it, going, that's freaking phenomenal, redirection of the ball, but everyone else is like, okay, whatever. And then, moments where my goalkeeper chooses to make a great decision on applying pressure to a striker, the striker misses, and I tell my goalkeeper, you've done a great job. You've not touched the ball, but you've done your job as a goalkeeper, and that's a save in my book, that you've applied pressure at the right time, at the right angle, force the striker to make a mistake, miss the goal, shank it, whatever. Awesome, that's your job. That's what you're supposed to do. So those moments are things that I think that goalkeepers have to really, take pride in. I think it's important. And I tell my goalkeeper all the time, I will always be their biggest hype man. Always. That's not just my job, but it's my obligation as a goalkeeper coach is to pump them up and get them feeling the best about themselves when they make those decisions. And I think that culturally, it's really important too that your other goalkeepers even are doing that for each other. And we're doing that here really, really well, where we're really good at encouraging each other, really good at letting each other know, like, hey, dude, that was an awesome save, that was a great decision. And also telling the truth too, like, hey, you could have done this differently, that should have been a little bit better, I know you can get to that ball, etc. So that environment, that culture is really, really important.
Completely, and you play such a perfect role in terms of being the anchor between the goalkeepers and maybe the outfields, for example. And I'm just thinking a scenario there. So the ball might come in at left back, and the left back might have an opportunity to play into the goalkeeper, and the goalkeeper can either switch play or they can build to go out from the back again. But the left back might not want to do that, and then consistently doesn't pass to the goalkeeper and always avoids that pass if they want to. But then that realistically comes down to your position as the goalkeeper coach to highlight that and then build that bridge between what the outfields could see and the goalkeepers, and work then in synergy with the head coach, etc. Because there's been times when I've been in that position and we've had a fantastic opportunity to go home, build again, switch play, but the defender has opted against doing so because he doesn't want to pass back to the goalkeeper, for example.
Right, and that gets hard, right? And that's where there's got to be some conversation and accountability too. And I think that's just going to come from people talking to each other and trying to stay away from assumptions. But also coaches making sure that they highlight areas that the goalkeeper is improving in, so that the outfield player has more confidence in the goalkeeper. I think that's really important too. And I think that's just going to come from honest conversations as well.
Absolutely, and again, I think that's brilliant. Well, since we've been speaking for the last hour and 24 minutes, Ali, again, it has been such a wonderful insight into, the life of a goalkeeper and a goalkeeping coach, and given this wonderful insight and delivery on this, which has certainly been a first to have a goalkeeper session on the pod. But, in the back of my mind, I'm very conscious of time and that commitment and around everything else that you do. So I'm just going to fire some quick fire questions at you, as I do with all guests.
Okay, sounds good.
Fantastic. If you had to have someone describe you in 3 words, what 3 words would they be?
Say that one more time.
If you had to have someone describe you in 3 words, what 3 words would they be?
Energy, passionate, and OCD.
Love that, brilliant. You might be in the place you already want to be and stay forever, but if you could move to any country to coach, where would it be?
I'm already very happy where I am. There's no changing my mind there.
I thought you were going to say that. If you could spend a day with any coach or manager, who would it be?
Oh, good question. I think. Oh, I mean, I would love to spend a full day with Van der Sar. Would be great. And I know he's not a coach or a manager, but I think he'd be a great person to have a day with. Gianluigi Buffon would be another one. It'd be a great person to have a day with. Manager though, I've been pretty lucky that I've been around a lot of people who kind of hard music, and I'm not trying to sound like it's boasting, like, but I've got to watch Solskjaer coach, I've got to watch Fergie coach, I've got to watch Jose Mourinho coach, so I've been lucky enough to be in those situations a few times. So yeah, there wouldn't be anyone else that kind of pops up right now.
Great choices, and even as a Chelsea fan, Van der Sar is one of my all-time favourite goalkeepers for sure.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. So he's someone I would love to. So actually, I don't know if you do know or you don't know, but his son is actually playing college soccer in America.
Right.
Yeah, he's playing for Pittsburgh. Really, really good men's program. So Van der Sar pops out to watch him play a few times a year. But yeah, so next question.
No, that's completely fine. Good insight. Who was or is your role model?
I don't have one specifically. I've got a few people. I always answer this question with, I am very lucky. I've managed to surround myself with people who gave me a little bit of their time. And the reason I'm in the position that I'm in now, and the reason I got started in this career, was because people gave me some time. And I try my best in every facet of my life to give people time. And whenever I've coaches reach out to me and people want to talk about sessions or goalkeeping or football in general or college coaching or whatever, I try my best to give people time to have conversations. So yeah, but if I go back to one very specific person, John Shields, who's the CEO of Manchester United's foundation, got me kick-started in this career a long time ago. He's been a massive support for me over the years. Andy Smith, who's the head of coaching for City Football Group for Man City. Andy's been a great resource for me. And then, people like Lisa Cole, Sergio here, some mates down in for US Soccer, a bunch of other people who've been great resources for me. So yeah, there's a lot of mentors and a lot of people that I would attribute having conversations with. Oh, actually, one more person for the college game, Derek Shaw, who got me into coming to America and kind of helped me navigate this world and college coaching as well. Derek's retired now, but Derek's been a massive resource for me for a really long time, and someone who's always been very blunt with me. And it always helped me my growth and a coach a lot.
Great names, and I'm sure they appreciate you as much as you appreciate them. If you had to give a top tip to any coach, what would it be?
Goalkeeper coaches, tell your goalkeepers to play the serve, not the drill. Drives me insane watching kids who coach says, okay, we're doing a W save, and they go through the drill and the ball goes to the right of them, and they either let it go or they reach over the ball and they don't dive, because they're so focused on the drill that they're not thinking about the actual serve in front of them and what would happen in a game of soccer. So my goalkeepers hear me shout that all the time: just play the serve, not the drill. Would be a piece of advice there.
I love that. I think that's such a brilliant top tip. If you weren't coaching, what would you be doing?
No idea. I mean, randomly, I love cooking, and I love Gordon Ramsay. I think he's awesome. So I love cooking shows, and my wife makes fun out of me about it all the time. But yeah, I honestly, football's never a career I thought I was going to be in. When I was 15, 16, and I was just starting out with United and stuff, and doing bits and bobs and stuff, and coaching and everything, was never a career I thought I would fall into. And things just kind of snowballed a little bit for me in a really, really good way.
I love that. You know, you never know what might happen or where it might go, but you know, football's a great course that you're on. What is your biggest pet peeve?
Oh, people not doing their jobs properly, or people half-assing things. I think at the end of the day, if you're going to do something, do it well. If you're going to put your name on something, do it well. I think it's so important, and I think carrying yourself in that way is really important. The other one, something a lot of people have told me over the years, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're already 10 minutes late. And I am early to absolutely everything. So I love the idea of when I have a coaching session, for example, no matter what it is, college, a clinic, whatever it is, before anybody turns up, it's all set up and ready to go. Like I'm a big believer in that. I think that professional approach is super important. And yeah, I got told a long time ago, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're already 10 minutes late. And I try my best to be early to everything.
Big fan of that, and completely on the same page with you with that massively. As much as you love cooking, what is your favourite thing to do in your downtime?
My dogs, play with my dogs. I've got 2 dogs and a wonderful wife who make coming home really, really easy. And my dogs are just both awesome characters, and they definitely and my kids and my goalkeepers and my team and the team. I talk about my dogs all the time, so they're 2 awesome characters who make mine and my wife's lives very whole. So they're great. And then also I have a wonderful sister-in-law who's 5 years old nearly. So she's 5 years old now, and she's awesome. Tatum, who FaceTimes me randomly and talks, and watching her grow up is really awesome.
I love that. I really, really love a personal accolade there. What does reflection mean to you?
An opportunity to realize how to be a little bit better. I think that reflecting is so important as a coach, and as a human being, it's important to kind of know things you're doing well. I think that could be done a little bit better. There's always a way to improve things, and I think reflecting is really, really important to do that. And I use a couple of different tools to help me do that. But it's a really, really important tool.
Absolutely. What are your 3 non-negotiables?
Oh, I love that question. 3 non-negotiables. I think high standards for me personally is really important. Communication. I'd rather over communicate than under communicate. And then being grateful. For what we have is really, really important. Those 3 I think will definitely be out there.
I love them 3. And a final one, which always finishes up nicely. What is one thing you enjoy most about coaching?
Pretty simply, the realization on a player, goalkeeper's face when they finally get something. So if I coached them something, taught them something, showed them something, and they finally it clicks, that realization on that person's face when it clicks is the reason I love doing what I do. And also the relationships. I'm a relationship-based person, and I love building great relationships. And I've got a million stories of when relationships have formed into moments of great gratitude and gratefulness, and also when I've been grateful that people have given me some time and I've given them some time.
I love that, and that wraps up such a wonderful episode and a great insight into goalkeepers, who they are, who Ali is, and the great work that you're doing, and definitely direct as you highlighted earlier to your socials, because I think there's so many wonderful resources and you provide that great context around it. But I really appreciate your time and you coming on today, Ali, and I'm glad that we can make this happen. And honestly, it's been such a fantastic, thought-provoking conversation, and been great to have these insights from you, and take so much away. And I've got a couple of pages worth of notes off you already, and points to hit back on. But I really appreciate it, Ali, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I also want to give a quick shout out as well to the United Goalkeeping Alliance. It's a group of goalkeeper coaches across the US and the UK now, and across the world now, run by a great gentleman from Pennsylvania called Eric Eisenhurt. And Eric's a college goalkeeper coach as well, and he started the United Goalkeeping Alliance, and you can Google them. Of just bringing together a network of goalkeeper coaches working in every area, level of the game, to pull ideas together and build a network. So a big shout out to Eric. He's fantastic, and he does a really, really good job. We've got a WhatsApp group that blows up every single day of different opportunities, and I definitely encourage you to check them out because they do some really, really good work. And I'm sure it's something you might find insightful as well.
Absolutely, I appreciate that, and definitely something to check out for myself as well as everyone else listening. But I really appreciate it again, and it's been wonderful to speak to you and make this happen. So your time has been so appreciated, and I hope it impacts and becomes a resource to so many.
No, I appreciate it, Luke. I appreciate your time. It was a really, really good conversation. So if you need anything, reach out, and yeah, we'll chat again soon for sure. But thank you.
No worries. Thank you from me, and take care, and see you soon.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
Bye.
It's really important to me that I get to work with people I enjoy working with, and people that I'm going to get along with, but also people that are going to challenge me and make me better. I'm very lucky here, Arizona State. I'm around 3 other colleagues, specifically on the coaching side, who are great people. Graham Winkworth, who's my head coach, he's been here now for 6-7 years. British as well. And a phenomenal person and a really, really, really good coach who's had a lot of success. And then Ross Alexander, who's a Scottish lad, who's been here for a couple of years now and done really, really well as a coach, and someone who's been around in different facets of the game. And then Holly Loud, who's an assistant coach here as well, who came here from a really, really good program in Alabama, and who's also only been here a couple of months. And again, just good people to be around. And again, all of them being British does help in terms of interactions and maybe not having to explain conversations more than I would do with an American coach sometimes. But good people to work with and people that have challenged me, made me a better coach, and people who are good to be around.